Haribol. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
So I'm just going to run. I left my glasses somewhere. Just 30 seconds.
Okay.
I sat down and I realized I didn't have them on when the screen wasn't so clear. So let me start out by chanting a little bit. Very happy to see the devotees present. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadari Yashodananda Raja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Raja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasari Go Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasari Go Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Vishnupada Paramahansa Paribhajagacharya Ashto Tarasata Shishimad Abhayacharya Narabinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Shira Prabhupada Ki Jai Nityalila Vishnu Vishnupada Ashto Tarasata Shishimad Shira Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Thakur Prabhupada Ki Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवाशरि गौर भक्तबिंद की श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोपिनाथ मुकुंद राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की वृंदावन धाम की मायापुर धाम की गंगमाई की जमुनमाई की तुलसी देवी की भक्ति देवी की सामवेद भक्त बिंद की श्री जुगदाम हरिनाम संकीर्तन की बृहत मिरंग की निताय गौर प्रेमानंदी. All glory to the sum of devotees. All glory to the sum of devotees. All glory to the sum of devotees. All glory to Shri Guru, Shri Gauranga, Shri Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. So today I had the good fortune speaking with Srila Satsarup Maharaj, who will kindly join the Latin American devotees for the launching of the Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, which is just being printed for the first time in Spanish. So you can imagine how many years all of you have had the Lilamrita and how in other languages, other countries, they're waiting until now, those who don't speak the English language. So being born in India or being of Indian descent, you have that, most of you have that privilege. Of course, with the privilege comes the responsibility. The responsibility, according to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is you have to take up Krishna consciousness and give it to others. Just like when Srila Prabhupada was in Delhi giving a lecture, one man said, "Why do you not have any Indian sannyasis?" And because at that time, it was very early in the movement, and the Prabhupada said, "Oh, you want Indian sannyasi?" He said, "Yes." He said, "You come here, sit here, I will give you sannyas right now." He said, "All right." No problem. So anyway, point is that you have the great fortune, because Srila Prabhupada presented Krishna consciousness in the English language. So you all have the great fortune of speaking English and having all of these books available, and so many things available. So I'm saying this because we're talking about the true path of bhakti. So what is the real true path of bhakti? The real true path is that we take the mercy of the parampara. And by taking the mercy of parampara fully and seriously, as the Bhagavatam says, Shrinvatam Sharaya Nityam Grinitas Cha Sutashtitam. Two ingredients. One should hear very carefully, and one should put it into practice very vigorously. Those are the ingredients to be on the truth path of bhakti. But in any case, I chose one verse from Bhagavad Gita, and there's a reason why I chose this verse, which I'll explain a little later, because in one sense, the verse is not talking directly about pure bhakti, but it is talking about the pure path of bhakti. So this is the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, text number 47, a very famous verse. Karmadhyevadhikaraste ma palashu kadachana ma karmapalir heturbhur mate sangosti karmani. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. You have the right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duty. So we'll read Srila Prabhupada's purport, and then there are three considerations here: prescribed duties, capricious work, and inaction. Prescribed duties are activities enjoined in terms of one's acquired modes of material nature. Capricious work means actions without the sanction of authority, and inaction means not performing one's prescribed duties. The Lord advised Arjuna not to be inactive, but that he perform his prescribed duty without being attached to the result. One who is attached to the result of his work is also the cause of the action. Thus, he is the enjoyer or sufferer of the results of such actions. Chakshurum militam yena tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadah Mahim Dharati Shwaparantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamani Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaudavani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Dishutarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivashadi Gauda Bhaktivinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Just pour a little water here. So I stopped here in the purport because the enjoyer or the sufferer of the results of actions. The Srila Prabhupada says, of course, in Bhagavad Gita, we find many statements where it says that one cannot really be the cause of action, but we are the cause of action. But Bhagavad Gita is speaking is that the cause or the causal activity may be very removed. Otherwise, certainly whatever you're suffering or enjoying through karma or through destiny has a cause. And that cause is done by us because we are, as Bhagavatam says, Bhunjana evatmakritam vipakam. We are atmakrita, we are the source of our destiny. But that's the reason that it's stated again and again that we're not really the cause of the action means the immediate action. The cause may be so far in the past that we have no knowledge of it. That's what it means. But here it's talking about not being the cause. How do you not be the cause? Otherwise, how do you enter the pure path of bhakti? How do you respond to Krishna without any interference from the mind, intelligence, or body? So we'll read on. I just wanted to mention that. As far as prescribed duties are concerned, they can be fitted into three subdivisions: routine work, emergency work, and desired activities. Routine work performed as an obligation in terms of scriptural injunctions without the desires for the result is action in the mode of goodness. Work with results becomes the cause of bondage. Therefore, such work is not auspicious. Srila Prabhupada is continuing that same. So if you don't desire any results, then you're in the mode of goodness. And of course, if you don't desire any results and you're doing for Krishna, that's in pure goodness. Everyone has his proprietary right to in regard to his prescribed duties, but should act without attachment to the results. Such disinterested obligatory duties doubtlessly lead one to the path of liberation. Arjuna was therefore advised by the Lord to fight as a matter of duty without attachments to the result. His non-participation in the battle is another side of attachment. And of course, he expressed this attachment in the beginning of the second chapter by saying, how can I kill with arrows in battle men like Drona and Bhishma, who were my very teacher and grandfather? How can I do this? So that's attachment. Any attachment, positive or negative, is the cause of bondage. Inaction is sinful. Therefore, fighting as a matter of duty was the only auspicious path for Arjuna. Now, of course, this is really Niskama Karma Yoga. But Niskama Karma Yoga is practically bhakti. The only difference is that Niskama Karma Yoga actually is based on our abilities and our destiny. Otherwise, we choose to act in a certain way according to our nature, according to our training, according to our culture. But we're fully dedicating the result to Krishna. That's niskama karma. But bhakti descends. It descends through the parampara. Of course, it can also descend through Krishna. It's like Srila Prabhupada in one famous class, and he was talking about the 7th chapter of the 1st canto of Bhagavatam, where Arjuna is being prodded by Krishna, being encouraged by Krishna to kill Ashvatthama. And Draupadi is saying no. And Bhima is saying yes. And so, it's like 2 against 1. And Arjuna, here's Krishna telling you to do something. And here's, and Bhima. And then, but here's your wife saying, don't do it. As they say, happy wife, happy life. So Arjuna was in quite a quandary. That what am I going to do in this case? So he got direction from Krishna, direct inspiration, and in the heart and from the teachings of Krishna. Krishna said, therefore you have to figure it out. And Srila Prabhupada comments in his class on those verses that such instructions from the Supreme Lord can only be given to a devotee on the level of Arjuna. Sometimes not sometimes, but all the time, I see people, they say, yes, God told me to do this. God told me to do that, but that's a very dangerous thing if you're not really fully in touch with God or with Krishna. So therefore, we're talking about the true path of bhakti. True path of bhakti is to hear directly from the Supreme Lord. And hearing from the Lord in the conditioned state means hearing from the parampara. It comes down. When it comes down, if you obey that instruction carefully and with intelligence. Arjuna could have just, as soon as Bhishma said, kill him, or Krishna said to kill him, he could have just killed him. But he could see there was something that Krishna wanted, because Draupadi was saying, no, he is the son of our Guru Mata. And so how can I've suffered so much by losing my sons. How could I ever wish that upon the wife of our Guru? So it was quite an incident. But the point is that Srila Prabhupada said that such direct instruction from Krishna is not something that we can. I'm sorry. There's a translation going on. I have to speak a little slower. So it's not something that can easily be had. We see it with Dhruva Maharaj. But before Dhruva Maharaj got that opportunity, he strictly followed the instructions of his spiritual master, Narada Muni, by chanting the mantra. Just like sometimes we can even be distracted from our chanting or from that direct instruction of the Guru by something spiritual. Just like Nanda Gopakumar, when he arrived in Jagannath Puri, he was like overwhelmed by the beauty of Jagannath, his mercy, his devotees, the spiritual atmosphere. Then one day, he saw his spiritual master, And then his spiritual master disappeared. And then later he saw his spiritual master on walking on the beach, and he was praying and singing and chanting mantra. And so he approached him and he said, "Do not forget to chant your mantra." Otherwise, he had become so absorbed in Lord Jagannath that he wasn't chanting his mantra. So devotional service is not the true path of bhakti. Real devotional service, we can never stray from the instructions of the spiritual master. There may be some moments of weakness, there may be some moments of difficulty, and there may be some mistakes, but just like Srila Prabhupada said, of course, in humility, he said, "I wasted so much time." Otherwise saying that I got the instruction in 1922, but I really didn't act on it until, like 1955, and 33 years later. So he said, "I wasted so much time. I know that." What Prabhupada was really saying is that the body forces us to waste time. The body and bodily designations and bodily duties and mental situations and intellectual deliberations, they all can cause us to lose our focus, and especially to lose our determination. So the point is that Arjuna was, but in Arjuna's case, not like Dhruva Maharaj, or not like many other devotees to whom Lord Vishnu appeared. Arjuna got direct order from the Supreme Personality of God. So Prabhupada said, to do that, you have to be like Arjuna. But any one of us can be engaged on the true path of bhakti, which means simply executing the orders of the spiritual master. It's like in a few days, starting on Sunday until the 24th, there's a glorification of Srila Prabhupada. I'm sorry, glorification of Bhakti Charu Maharaj. And so I spoke one little segment of that. And I said that I felt that Bhakti Charu Maharaj had captured the mood of Srila Prabhupada, that Srila Prabhupada always attributed anything, any success that he had, he attributed it to simply following the instructions of his spiritual master. And I saw that was always Bhakti Charu Maharaj. I had good fortune of spending some time with him in the early days when he was a new sannyasi and translating the Prabhupada's books into Bengali, especially Srimad Bhagavata, especially Chaitanya Charitamrita. So, point is that this is the true path of bhakti. In Mahabharata, it explains this. If you want bhakti, if you want the highest possible blessing and benefit, then what do? Tarko Pratishta, you can't find it through logic and argument. Shutayo Bibinam. You also, there are so many different types of religions, every one of them with philosophy, with its, and people with faith, and they have, sadhus, they may not be like Vedic sadhus, but some kind of sadhus. All these things are there. And so how will you determine? By everybody's very convinced of their process. And then Nashabhishu Yasya Mantam Nabinam. Then what about the rishis, following the rishis. Well, the rishis, they all have a different point of view. So, dharmasya tattvam nihitam guhayam. So if you really want to know the secret of devotional service, the very meaning, it is hidden within the heart of the devotees. That's where you will find it, within the heart of a devotee. You won't find it anywhere else. No. And so, Mahajanena Gata Sapanta. So we accept the parampara, we accept Srila Prabhupada. This is the true path of bhakti. But going to the Bhagavatam, well, first let me make some points about this verse. This verse, for anyone who has material desires, this verse is not very palatable. What is Krishna saying? He's saying three things. No, that karmani eva adhikara. You have the right to do your duty. Not only do you have the right, but you must do it. But when you do it, oh, wait a minute. Ma palashu kadachana. You're not entitled to the fruits. You're not entitled to the results. And ma karma palahetur bur. And nor should you think that you're not entitled to the fruits, nor should you think that you're the cause. So that's very unpalatable to a conditioned soul. I have to work. I can't enjoy the results, and nor can I even take pride in saying that I did it. Just like there was a famous song by Frank Sinatra. I don't know how many of you even know who Frank Sinatra was, but maybe somebody does. No, if somebody is into music, they will know. But anyway, he sang a song, "I'll Do It My Way." That was one of his probably his most famous song. I'll do it my way. So this is the total opposite of what's being said here. You have to, because Krishna is saying, you have to work. You can't. You're not entitled to the fruits, nor are you the cause of the results. So, what's left? Then he says, and you should not be prescribed. You may think, well, then what's the use? But then Krishna says, but you can't not work. You have to work. No fruits. You're not the cause, and you can't not do it. So what does that leave us? That leaves us with the transcendental platform. That's why I chose this verse, because it leaves us with the platform of what is the alternative? So that alternative was sought by the sages of Naimisharanya. First two questions by the sages was, please explain what is the most beneficial thing for humanity. And the answer was the 6th verse of the 2nd chapter of 1st canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, Savaipam, so Paro Dharma, Savaipam Sam Paro Dharma. The best thing for humanity is Paro Dharma. Paro Dharma means devotional service. And devotional service, it means actually sadhana bhakti. Yato bhaktir doksache. And yato bhaktir doksache means the perfection. Otherwise, one is sadhana, yato bhaktir doksache means prema bhakti. And what are the elements of prema bhakti? Ahituki apratiyata. It must be unmotivated. It must not have a cause. So how can you say that devotional service doesn't have a cause? There is a slight cause. But what it means, it doesn't have a cause, it's causeless. And the mercy of the Lord is also causeless. Because the Lord cannot give his mercy to someone and not another one. Therefore, it must be the duty of a devotee. But bhakti in itself is causeless. Otherwise, bhakti eternally exists as the basis of the relationship between the Supreme Lord and the devotees. And then the second question of the sages is, tell us the essence of all scriptures, which can totally satisfy the living entity. And the answer was the same verse, but also taking into consideration the next verse of the second chapter, verse number 7. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Jnanayat Yasya Vairagyam Jnanam Chayada Tukam. So that second part, second verse, which is actually very, very wonderful verse, because it says Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says Prayojitaha can mean two things. Prayojitaha. Yojitaha means to be endowed with something, and prakarina means very strongly, very forcefully, very completely. So to be completely endowed with the faculty to do what? Yato bhaktir dhoksache. To worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the process of bhakti. But in this case, bhakti is not the process. It is the life and soul of the devotee. And it can also mean prayojita. This is also the goal. It's the goal, and it is the dasya, shantaras, dasyarak, or shantaras is usually left out because it implies impersonalism, although devotees who are in shantaras with dasya, like Prahlad Maharaj and other devotees, they're serving the Lord, but their service is principally done through admiration and prayers. So then, Sakyaras, Vatsalyaras, Madhuryaras. This is the prayojita. This is what you get. And from there, you don't have to worry about anything else. If you actually reach that platform, you don't have to worry about anything else, because everything else will be supplied automatically. Just like knowledge. Of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Vairagya Vidha Nicha Bhakti Yoga, that devotional service should include these things, the knowledge and renunciation. But the Bhagavatam says that these things are not only included, they're produced by bhakti. And any knowledge that is not produced by bhakti means that it has something to do with this material world. And any renunciation that doesn't come from bhakti. Just like as many times I've mentioned that Srila Prabhupada in Los Angeles, he would come back from his morning walk, and they would give him some Mahaprasadam. And of course, especially the senior devotees, they would all get a piece of Mahaprasadam. So one devotee asked Srila Prabhupada, why did Raghunath Goswami just eat some rice, old rejected rice, or all the Goswamis, they would eat a couple of palm foods of, buttermilk or something a day. Why didn't they take Mahaprasadam? So Prabhupada said, yes, they did, because they were associating with Krishna 24 hours a day. And their meditation was on Krishna. And that meditation was so strong that this particular verse that we just considered, Kamani Vadikara, that particular verse was, automatically there. Otherwise, they were completely detached because they were so attached to Krishna. As Krishna says, Maya Sattamana Partha, just attach your mind to me. So this is the real secret of pure devotional service. You have to attach your mind to Krishna. So that pure devotional service was also described in Bhagavad Gita in several places, very close to one another, in the heart of Bhagavad Gita. First of all, the last verse of the 9th chapter, Man manabhavamat bhakto mam yaji mam namaskuru, mami vaishyasi yuktaivam, atmanam parayanaha. That if you should think of Krishna, but from the position of devotee, you should become his devotee. You should worship Krishna and namaskar. That namaskuru. Namaskuru means offering obeisances. In this case, what obeisances does it mean? It means that we follow everything that Krishna says. That is the real obeisance. Sometimes we become very external and we think, if I go in the temple, I offer dandavats, then that shows I'm very sincere. But it may be a product of sincerity, but it's also an external declaration of surrender. But the internal demonstration or indication of surrender is that I want to do everything that Krishna says. Everything is an offering to Krishna. Namaskuru. Mami Vaishyasi Yuktaivam. Always related to Krishna. Then you will come to him. So this is the path of pure bhakti. Then later, Machchita Madgatapana. That my consciousness, Krishna is the composition. My consciousness is composed of Krishna, his leelas, pastimes, names, qualities, and then Ganaprana, Gataprana. Gataprana means that Krishna is my very life and soul. And therefore, when I'm with the devotees, I want to be with the devotees because they will talk about Krishna and I will hear about Krishna, or I will speak about Krishna and they will hear about Krishna. So this is that particular verse. So the essence of all scriptures, the same verse describes. The essence of all scriptures describes Krishna as being without a cause, and his devotional service is without a cause, and we should try to please him without any personal motivations, and we should always be serving Krishna. There's a beautiful verses related to that spoken by Lord Kapila Dev, that Madguna Shutamate Matrena, that when one actually becomes expert in the scriptures, then the reciting or speaking about Krishna's qualities and Krishna's everything about Krishna, then Maya Sarva Guhasaye, that Guhasaye means that then one enters into the inner regions of Krishna consciousness, Manogatir Avichchina. Then the mind, once we do that, the mind cannot be stopped. It's totally focused on Krishna. Yata Gangam Vasao Budao. That just like the Ganga, who can stop the Ganga? Of course, they put some dams, but those dams, if they don't let the Ganga continue, the dams will overflow and break. So Lakshanam Bhakti Yogasya, that Bhakti Yogasya, the quality of always being engaged in devotional service is essential. Nirgunasya upahritam. That it should be without any material, nothing material. It's all spiritual. Ahaituk yavyayahata. Vyahita. It should be without cause. And the same thing, yayavhita or apratiyata means basically the same thing. There shouldn't be any interruptions. Ya bhakti purushottame. And in that way we perform devotional service. So devotional service is very strong, it's very powerful. And so if we feel weakness, then that weakness, if we feel weakness in our execution of devotional service, it means that it's not the fault of bhakti. Bhakti flows continuously. Bhakti is fully present in the orders of instructions of the spiritual master. Bhakti is most quickly manifest, as Lord Chaitanya said, that Sadhu Sangha Nama Kirtan Bhagavata Shravane. When we associate with devotees, when we chant the holy name, when we hear the Bhagavatam, Mathura Vasa, when we live in a holy place or purify our place of residence, and Shraddhaya, when we worship Shraddhina Murtina, when we worship the deity with great faith and devotion, then devotional service becomes very pure. Of course, Rupa Goswami, he describes pure devotional service, anya bila shita shunyam jnana karma janavritam anukulena krishna anushilanam bhakti uttama. Krishna Krishna anushilanam. Anu means to follow. Shilanam means the most wonderful practice. When that wonderful practice is anakulya, when it is totally favorable. Favorable means it's pleasing Krishna. Just like whatever we do for someone is either favorable or unfavorable. If it pleases them, it's favorable. If it doesn't please them, it's unfavorable. So, Shilanam Bhakti Uchate. So Bhakti Uchate, this is pure devotional service. And also, another aspect of Bhakti is that Sarvapadi, what should we see when we perform devotional service? Sarvapadi Vinirmuktam. We should become free from all the upadis. Upadis means designations. We should be free from the designations. Sarvapadi Vinirmuktam. All of that. Tatparatvaena Nirmala. And that should be the way we can eliminate everything inauspicious. And then what happens? Rishikena, Rishikesha. Then we offer our senses to the master of the senses, Sevanam Bhakti Uchate, who engages our senses in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, I don't know why today this light is bothering my eyes a little bit. So I have to be a little bit in darkness. Sorry about that. The light's like glaring. So this is another quote, very famous, that what brings us onto the path of pure bhakti? Sarvapadi, giving up all these upadis and being fixed in the service of Krishna or Paramatma, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and knowing him. Just like Arjuna in the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, he says, Rishikena Rishikesha. He says Rishikesha so many times. You are the master of the senses. He's basically saying, therefore, take over my senses. Take over my senses. So this is something that is very important. Another aspect of pure devotional service came from a very mystical experience, which is found in the Puranas, that there was a temple of Lord Shiva. And so one devotee, he stated that Lord Shiva actually is in favor of pure devotional service. And of course, the Shaivites didn't accept that. He said that Shiva was the real knower of devotional service. So these persons, they said, all right, if you want us to believe that, then Lord Shiva should tell us. So the devotee went to the temple of Shiva and he prayed. And the next morning, the priest found a verse just written right there. He didn't know who wrote it, but it was obviously written by Lord Shiva. Aham betti shuku betti vyasa vetti navetti va. So it's Lord Shiva is saying, Aham betti, I know the real true path. And Shuka, he is Shukadev, he also knows. Vyasadev, he may know or he may not know. Bhaktya Bhagavatam Grahyam. No. That we should accept that the process of devotional service, bhaktya, comes from devotees. And devotees are presenting the Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam is also known as the Paramahansa Samhita. So from the devotees and from the Bhagavatam, if we accept them, then otherwise, if we accept the parampara. So it says Vyasa may or may not know, meaning that because he has received this Bhagavatam from, it's interesting that Shukadeva Goswami was his son, but he heard the Bhagavatam from Shukadeva Goswami. And Shukadeva, otherwise, so Vyasa knew it because he told it, but the nature of parampara is that we're always willing to hear because there's something we don't know about Krishna. There's always something we don't know. So therefore, Shuka, by knowing, he told Vyasadeva. Otherwise, it's the parampara. We give our credit to the parampara, not that I'm very knowledgeable, that I'm very learned. This is the true path of bhakti. Giving, being situated in the parampara with two qualifications in order to be a link in the parampara, because we all have that duty. We all have that duty that's been given to us by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Charita Katari Kaha Krishna Padesh Amara Gyaya Guru Hanyatara Edesh. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said we all must become guru. We must know the path of bhakti. You have to be a guru. Just like if I join Krishna consciousness today and somebody else joins tomorrow, I have a duty to help that devotee. If someone joins a year later, I have more of a duty. We all have this duty. It is given to us by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That, and we can never figure it out. We can never figure out the absolute truth. We can never understand bhakti. Na buddhya, na chatikaya. Na buddhya, not by our own intelligence, na cha tikena. Tikaya. We cannot, tikaya means different commentaries. We can't even learn the absolute truth from different commentaries if we don't have the parampara. Just like nowadays, there are many commentaries, especially available in English. And of course, if you read Sanskrit, you can read them directly. But that's even more dangerous in one sense. Today I spoke to a professor, Professor Gajendra Panda. I was a little reluctant. He's in Gujarat, India. He's the head of the Sanskrit department in the University of Gujarat. So he invited me to speak on a chapter of Bhagavad Gita during Gita Jayanti to a worldwide audience. I told him, I don't know if I'm so qualified. And he said, oh, don't worry. Professor Senapati will give a 1 hour presentation in Sanskrit. And then you should give the presentation in English. So I was happy because I thought I would like to know Sanskrit, but if I did, I would probably find some faults in Senapati's presentation, and then I would be put on the spot to have to say something different. Because I don't speak Sanskrit, then I'll just have to, I can say what I want, and he knows that I didn't hear what he said, so he might just take it as my opinion, and hopefully everybody else can understand Srila Prabhupada's point of view. So this man was very, very nice. But the point is that, practically speaking, every devotee that learned Sanskrit very profoundly, somehow or another, could not simply remain fully and 100% faithful to Srila Prabhupada. They wanted to go out and look here and there and everywhere. And so it was a very dangerous thing. Janmaishvara Shuta Shivir Edamana Manapumam. That Queen Kunti says that very aristocratic birth, wealth, too much learning, and too much bodily beauty or having the wonderful qualities. It can be very wonderful if we can use it in Krishna, but it can be very intoxicating. It can feed the false ego. So therefore, Lord Shiva revealed that the real path of bhakti is that we don't claim to know. We don't take the credit. We give the credit to the parampara. So this verse, famous verse from the Bhagavatam, Savai Pumsa Paro Dhammo Eto Agdya Eto Bhakti Doksacheya Hetu Kipatita Eyatma Supasidati. It is capable of satisfying the self. True bhakti. Otherwise, the fact that it was said like that, this is capable of satisfying the self. This is very capable of it. Otherwise, you don't need anything else. Just like in the beginning with the Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam Mahamune Pita. Kim, what is this Srimad Bhagavatam given by Mahamuni? Srimad Bhagavatam given by Vyasadeva, by Shukadev Goswami. It's so complete. What is the need of anything else? Just like the last question of the sages. I'm just remembering this, relating this to our topic today, because on Wednesday I gave a class on the 6 questions by the sages of Naimisharanya. And so the last question is, where will we find religion? Where will we find spirituality now that Krishna has left the planet? And the answer was in the end of the 3rd chapter of the 1st canto, which Srila Prabhupada decided to include in, I think it's 1.3.43, to include in the beginning of every one of his Bhagavatams. Krishna Swa Dhammo Pagate Dharmagana Dvisaha Kalona Shamishame Shat Puranarko Dunoditaha. Where will we find Dharma? In the Srimad Bhagavatam. So therefore, the Sutta Goswami answering the sage's question, the last question, and of course, the rest of the answer to that question is the rest of the Bhagavata. Otherwise, that was the introduction. Here is where you will find Krishna. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that Krishna is present in 4 places. And he's present in his holy name. He's present in the Bhagavatam. He's present in worshiping Tulsi Devi. And he's present in Ganga, meaning the Ganga carries the dust of his lotus feet. That's where we can find Krishna. Of course, we could, but the main place is the Bhagavatam. So the truth path of bhakti is enunciated in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, and how is it manifested in this age? Etavam, the Bhagavatam says Etavam evalokeshmin, that it's Pumsa Dharma Parashvitaha. If one wants to understand the ultimate religious principle, Pumsa Dharma Parashvitaha. One wants to remember, one wants to know the highest principle of Dharma, Bhakti Yoga, Bhagavati, Tan Nama Grahana Adibi. Grahana means to accept or to possess. So Tad Nama, it is possessed in the chanting of the holy name. That is where it's possessed. So devotional service, which begins with the holy name. Of course, Jiva Goswami says it doesn't just begin with the holy name. Every activity in devotional service begins and ends in the chanting of the holy name. So therefore, what is the true path of bhakti? Srimad Bhagavatam, holy name. And what causes the true path, or what causes bhakti to manifest? It is really the association with devotees. Although association with devotees, according to Rupa Goswami, ado shraddha ta sadhu sangha. Sadhu sangha, devotional service. Rupa Goswami is giving the elements of devotional service. One of them is association with devotees. So how can, if association of devotees is included within bhakti, how can bhakti, how can it be the cause of the association of devotees? Because the devotees are the carriers of bhakti. And therefore, although it's never caused in the sense it's never like created, but it is caused by the Madhyam Adhikaris who take up the arduous task of delivering devotional service unto the fallen conditioned souls. So this is the Bhagavatam, Bhakti Yoga, Bhagavati. Bhakti Yoga is established by the chanting of the holy name. So therefore, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, what I began with, what I said, first of all, association with devotees, because without that association, you will not understand devotional service. Narada Muni understood by taking the remnants of the Bhakti Vedantas, and those Bhakti Vedantas, he took the remnants from their plate, but the main remnant that he took was the remnants of hearing, because as I mention this verse often, Pibantiye Bhagavata Atmanam Satam, that Atmana Satam, that, the Bhagavatam at the end of the 2nd chapter, 2nd canto, it says, please drink this message of the Bhagavad Katamritam, because it is nectar. Everybody likes to drink nectar. Sometimes we call our drinks nectar, sometimes incorrectly, because we put too much sugar. And then, of course, too much sugar, white sugar, means a great potential for diabetes. But if you take the real sugar, the nectar of katamritam, kata amrita, katamritam, tam, katamritam, Shravana, that second line, katamritam, can't remember right now, but it says, taking it in through the holes of the ears, then punanti ye vishaya vidushita shayam. By doing that, all the misgivings, all the problems, all the difficulties in life will disappear. They will be consumed. And of course, in the beginning, the third verse of the Bhagavatam, pipata, drink this Bhagavatam. It's such nectar. So this nectar is so important because it will eliminate everything inauspicious. It will fill our ears and it will fill our hearts. The famous verse, Bhavati Vidkarna Rasayanam Kata, that this Rasayanam Kata. So where does that taste for the Bhagavatam come from? Again, in the second chapter of the first canto of Bhagavatam, it tells us, Shushusho Shradhanasya Vasudeva Kata Ruchi, that Shushusho Shradhan, if one hears with great faith and devotion this message of the Srimad Bhagavatam, or the message of glorification of Krishna, then where does it come from? Where does that taste come from? Syan Mahat Sevaya Vipra. It comes from serving the devotees of the Lord. And therefore, I always emphasize that Lord Chaitanya said that Krishna consciousness, the mission of Krishna consciousness, consists of three things. Vaishnava Seva, serving the Vaishnavas, and also Vaishnava Seva, Nami Ruchi. If we serve the Vaishnavas, serving the Vaishnavas means we see them as our Prabhu. We don't discriminate. We see them. We may discriminate in the sense of who will I associate with more, or who will I not associate with but always respect because they're Vaishnava, as Rupa Goswami directs us. At least within the mind, you must appreciate, you must feel happy upon seeing a devotee. It's like Srila Prabhupada was so happy to see the first devotees that he met in New York. He was so happy to see them. They had some interest. They said, "Are you a Swami? Can you teach us?" That brought such happiness, although they had no idea of what Srila Prabhupada would teach them. If they did, they probably would have run away. Too much sacrifice, too much austerity. This goes against the grain of everything that I'm doing in my sense gratification. But that was Srila Prabhupada's happiness. And then he saw devotees coming. Then he saw people dancing and chanting, taking prasadam. Then he saw, he printed some articles and devotees were out distributing them, distributing the holy name 12 hours a day. Sometimes we go out on Hari Nam for a few hours. They would go out, in those days, they would, even when I joined, we would go out Hari Nam 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day, every day. In the beginning, of course, there was no Mangal Artik. Everybody lived in the temple. There was no Mangal Artik. There was no class. The only thing there was Harinam Sankirtan. Devotees would sometimes get up at 6 o'clock. Sometimes Srila Prabhupada had to come in and wake them up because, if you do 12 hours of Harinam, it's a little tiring. You're dancing and chanting for 12 hours. And then gradually, the whole process unfolded. So this is another aspect of the pure bhakti, the pure path of bhakti, is that it increases. Just like we Anandam buddhi vardhanam, the bliss increases, but also the process itself increases. In the beginning, we know something about serving Krishna. And then after we know something about serving Krishna, then we learn more and more and more and more. And then there's so many things to do. And then we try to deepen it more and more. This is what bhakti means. It doesn't mean it's not stagnated. It's not stereotyped. We have a tendency to do these things. We stereotype it. Yes, I know I do this. We make it into a routine. We do it every day. Of course, one thing is sadhana. Sadhana is also a type of routine. But sadhana should be producing a result. It should be producing ever increasing patiparam purnamitas vadanam. It should be at every step, we should be getting some more taste. And if we're not, that's a yellow light, like in stoplights. You know, they have green, yellow, red. So green means parampara, chanting the holy name. Yellow means that I'm falling into some kind of, type of routine. When you fall into a routine, then the concentration wanes, it goes away, it diminishes, and then it goes away. And you're just doing something. So we become spiritual zombies. Otherwise, we're doing something, but we're not getting the full spiritual benefit. So the true path of bhakti has been illustrated by so many great devotees. And one of the greatest illustrations was Dhruva Maharaj. Because Dhruva Maharaj, he was, first of all, how did he even come to bhakti? Out of jealousy, out of anger, out of frustration? No. That's how he came to bhakti. Anger, practically all negative things brought him to bhakti. All these negatives. But then what happened? He followed the orders of his spiritual master. By his great determination, which was initially fueled by anger, frustration, jealousy, etc. It was purified by the activities given by the spiritual master. And this is the path of bhakti. You follow the instructions of Sri Guru, Vaishnava, Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaking Bhagavad Gita, speaking Uddhava Gita, purports of Srila Prabhupada, the instructions of the spiritual master, the guidance of the Vaishnavas. This is all taking us to that true path of bhakti. And then, Dhruva Maharaj, by doing that, because he was so determined to chant his mantra, that the Lord appeared. And when the Lord appeared, he said, I don't want anything. This is real bhakti. That one has displaced the material desires, the desires coming from conditioning, one displaces them by the pleasure of serving Krishna. It should be pleasure. Actually, we have all experienced this, that the greatest pleasure we experience in life is pleasing someone else, much more than pleasing ourselves. Pleasing oneself through sense gratification can be, it can provide some sensual or mental or intellectual pleasure. But when you please somebody else, it gives you so much more of a lasting pleasure. And what to speak of pleasing Krishna, pleasing Srila Prabhupada, by just doing what he said. That is the pure path of bhakti. It means taking very seriously. The pure path of bhakti means also taking Bhagavad Gita as a whole, not what I like and forget about what I don't like, but take it as a whole. Another great example was Haridas Thakur, when he was in the Mahapraharana Lila of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the 21 hours where Lord Chaitanya revealed himself. Lord Chaitanya glorified Haridas, that how he was so detached that he even offered his own. He offered that when the people who were torturing him said, "You have to die." He said, "Oh, am I inconveniencing you by not dying? Oh, I don't want to do that. Let me die." No. How many of us would do that? No. Somebody's giving us some trouble and saying, if you don't die, I'll be in trouble. Oh, let me die. No, not many of us are on that platform. And then afterwards, Haridas was glorified by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, who said, this level of what you've done for me, how you sacrificed for me, being tortured like that. I want to make you the king of the world. And Haridas said, "No, my Lord, I just want to serve." He said, "I want to endow you with all mystical potencies." And he said, "No, my Lord, I just want to do your service birth after birth." And he said, "I want to make you the king and the emperor of the universe." And Haridas said, "My dear Lord, none of these things will please me. What will please me is that birth after birth, that same Brahmin who would come and argue and barter with me about the price of bananas. That's what I want birth after birth. I want you to come and argue with me." So there's a deeper meaning to that. When the Lord argues with us, ordinarily if someone argues, or like it, excuse me, in the case of Shivananda Sain, whose disappearance we celebrated a few days ago, recognized, Shivananda Sain took great pleasure that Lord Nityananda kicked him in the stomach. Generally, if someone kicks us in the stomach, we won't take great pleasure. We'll be very angry, probably strike back. But Shivananda was happy. And Haridas, he said, "My Lord, my greatest pleasure is that you're arguing with me." That means that a devotee finds the same amount of pleasure by being chastised by Krishna or being rewarded by Krishna. Generally speaking, we want rewards and we're not so anxious for chastisement. But a devotee wants that. I just want your devotional service birth after birth. And therefore, Lord Chaitanya made that part of his Shikshastakam. Mama jamane jamanishware bhavatad bhakti rahaitukitwai. Not only do I want your devotional service birth after birth, but Lord Chaitanya says, I want it to be there without any other consideration. So there's so many examples, and actually every example in the Bhagavatam. What to speak, the example of Ambarish Maharaj. He was challenged by the greatest sage, who was actually a partial incarnation of Lord Shiva, Durvasa Muni. He was challenged by him. He was attacked by him. And he just said, all right. But the Lord protected him. So one may say, well, wait a minute, I got beat up the other day by 2 thugs. Where was the Lord? He didn't protect me. Well, where is your pure devotion? No. Otherwise, why shouldn't you be attacked by thugs? And if you do get attacked by thugs, take it as Krishna's mercy. Of course, we don't have to go looking for thugs to attack us so that we can get some special mercy. We probably have enough difficulties without looking for them. Queen Kunti said, give me more. We're saying, give me less. But Lord Brahma said, let me just see everything you're giving me as your mercy, and let me patiently await that mercy in whatever form it manifests. So this is bhakti. All of these things are bhakti. If we want the true path of bhakti, really, what does it mean? You hear the Bhagavad Gita. You hear the Srimad Bhagavatam. You hear Chaitanya Charitamrita. You hear nectar of devotion. You associate with devotees. You do devotional service. And as much as possible, you don't try to you don't try to produce a result, as the verse we read from Bhagavad Gita. Don't think you're causing it. Just try to please Krishna. He will cause whatever he wants to cause, and whatever he causes will be of great benefit for you. So these are some aspects. We could quote 150, 200 verses from Bhagavatam about the true path of bhakti. We could speak so many verses from Bhagavad Gita, but this is a basic, outline of what we mean by true bhakti. True bhakti means you must be serious, you must be sincere. Sincere means hearing, and serious means chanting. And Srila Prabhupada said all of our devotional service is an extension of our hearing and chanting. Hearing means we learn, and chanting or serving means we put it into practice. So I want to thank you all very much for your kind attention. I'll stop here. Are there any questions, comments?
Hare Krishna, Gurudev. Talking about pure devotional service, Srila Prabhupada said that we just can't do something whimsically and offer the results to Krishna. Krishna is not a purifying agent. So I mentioned that to one devotee.
What Krishna said what?
No, I said Srila Prabhupada said that you can't just do something whimsical and just offer it to Krishna.
Right. You
I
can't.
I mentioned that to one devotee, and he quoted this verse, Yat karosi yarasnasi, whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer or give away, do that as an offering to me. So how do you reconcile that?
Well, what does he mean by repression? No. In this case, repression means that when we have a tendency to not offer that tendency to Krishna, that's what Krishna means by not repressing. Otherwise Krishna karmarpane, which Narottam Das Thakur says, if you have some tendency or some desire, learn how to do it for Krishna. That's what it means by no repression. And no repression doesn't mean let me follow Rajneesh. No. Otherwise, whatever I feel, I'll just do it. And then by doing that for however long I have to do it, then I'll be liberated, because but Bhagavad Gita doesn't say that. Bhagavad Gita says dushpurne nanolena cha. The fire will increase more and more and more and more. So that's how we see it. Otherwise, many devotees have used that verse, what can repression accomplish? And therefore, hey, there's the bar. And, I like bars. So why should I repress my desire?
That is one verse, but I was actually talking about Yat karosi yarasnasi. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer or give away, do that as an offering to me. The devotee quoted that verse for me.
Okay.
So how do you reconcile that?
Well, again, that's Niskama Karma Yoga. It means, I want to eat, so let me do it for Krishna. But bhakti means I want to do what pleases Krishna. So I don't want to just take what I like to do and offer it to Krishna and try to be free from desiring any result from it. Bhakti means I accept what descends from Krishna. No, so there's a big difference. Of course, that's a very valid verse. Krishna speaks it. Yat karosi yarasnasi. But it still implies personal consideration. There's a personal consideration. So it's not whimsical. When Prabhupada says whimsical means that it's not an authorized process. Niskama Karma Yoga is an authorized process. So Yat karosi, that's an authorized process. But whimsically doesn't mean, that's not what it means.
Somebody has a question here.
I see Radha Raman. Is that the one you're talking about?
No, somebody sent a direct question to me. You want to
Oh.
take this one first, or?
Well, let me go to this one since I saw it first.
Okay.
First come, first serve. So, of course, that may have been there first. So, here's a question, unrelated to the topic in a way. Which Prabhupada said if it's not related, we shouldn't ask. But anyway, we'll take it into consideration. When we die and on our way to the spiritual world, well, you're doing well. You know you're going to the spiritual world. Congratulations. I know we won't remember our material lives because it is as if we are waking up in the spiritual world. But as I am conscious of myself and my interactions with other people in this world, when we get to the spiritual world, will we know that we were actually associating with Krishna and the devotees there, meaning, I guess, in the material world? I know Krishna is here with me, but I just fear that I will not be with Krishna or even know I'm there with him after I leave this world. And well, believe me, when you're with Krishna directly, you could care less about Trinidad or material world or my mother, my father. We already could care less about so many mothers and fathers. We've had so many mothers and fathers, we could care less about them now. We don't know who they are. And if we saw them, we might not even like them. So if you're very fortunate, or any of us are very fortunate to go to the spiritual world, just like one devotee asked Srila Prabhupada, if I'm an eggplant in the spiritual world and Krishna eats me, what happens? And so Prabhupada said, when you go there, you will find out. So, we shouldn't speculate about the spiritual world. We should just, if I'm so fortunate to go there, then everything will be perfectly arranged. It's not that I go there and say, wait a minute, I'm not, I know I got here, but I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do, but, I just wonder what's happening back in Trinidad. Because if we even think about Trinidad or anything about my previous life, we won't go to the spiritual world. And when you go, you won't, everything here will be, everything that's very important will become insignificant. Okay, you can go ahead. Yeah, go ahead with your question, and then we'll take Radha Ballabha Prabhu.
So this one devotee asked, what is the highlighted difference between Raganuga, Bhava, and Prema Bhakti?
Prema Bhakti is Raganuga, but Raganuga Bhakti starts on the platform of Bhava Bhakti. But Prema Bhakti is the ultimate manifestation of Raganuga. Raganuga means just following our attachment for Krishna. That's what it literally means, follow your attachment for Krishna. So a devotee situated in Prema Bhakti, that is the ultimate step or manifestation of Raganuga Bhakti. The beginning, there are some beginnings of Raganuga in feeling attraction for Krishna, or even rati. There's some little indications, but Raganuga really begins at the platform of Bhava Bhakti. So now Radha Ballabha Prabhu. You have your microphone muted. Radha Ballabha Prabhu, you have your microphone muted. We can't hear you. Can you hear me? Radha Ballabha. Haribo, we can't hear you. Okay, well, anyways, I don't know what's going on there. So you have another question there? Wow. Do you have another question, Achuladharika?
I think Radhavardhana Prabhu is, I'm not seeing him here.
Yeah, he is. I'm going to ask him, I'm asking him to unmute.
I looked in a list here and he's not.
Okay. All right.
Okay, he's
now
here.
he's got it. Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't able to unmute. It was saying that it
Oh,
was
okay. Yeah, I had
allow us
to.
to unmute.
Yeah, the host, which is Preshta, he had locked everybody's microphone.
All right. First of all, my humble obeisances to you, Maharaj, and thank you for a nice class. Now, what happens to me, I'm kind of a hog here because I wrote down 4 questions. But
I didn't go into that, you know. I didn't go into the full.
I'm not going to ask all of them.
Okay.
The first one is, we see so many people who engage in sinful activities. And we can recognize that, you know, they're meat eaters, you know, they're sex mongers, things like that. And sometimes we have a tendency to find fault. Of course, we should not really find fault because we can also get reaction for that. So how do we adopt the proper attitude whereby we do not try to find fault with them and somehow or the other try to assist them to come up to a better standard?
Well, that requires application of Shikshastika, you know, especially the 3rd verse. If we have sufficient humility and tolerance, and we really respect the people in spite of their shortcomings or, you know, bad qualities or whatever may be surrounding them, and therefore we apply the 18th verse of the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, that Vidya Vinaya Sampane, you know, that we see people with an equal vision. Samasarvashu Bhuteshu. We don't see them in terms of how the modes of nature are acting upon their bodies and their minds. We see the soul. Then, in spite of whatever they may do or say or how they may react, we simply try to give them something. You know? Just like one, I've said this before, but one, I can't remember if he was a businessman or a professor, but I think he was a businessman, came to see Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada spoke to him some, and he couldn't really understand what Prabhupada was saying, or he couldn't capture the full essence of it. And so Prabhupada said, bring prasadam. And so they brought some gulab jamun. You know, this man had a nice suit and tie. He looked at the gulab jamuns. You know, usually people like that, they expect a little plate with a napkin and a fork, you know. And so he looked at him and Prabhupada said, so you can take? And he was reluctant. So he told the devotee, you know, he indicated to the devotee took a gulab jamun and threw it in his mouth and just, you know, chewed on it. And so the man took the gulab jamun, these were nicely made gulab jamuns, and took it like this, you know, held it up. And as soon as he held it up, the juice started running down his sleeve. And then he tried to take a bite of it, and it squirted out all over his pants and shirt. And, you know, and then, you know, and then it was still running more down his sleeve. And he finally took, it was so good that he said, can I have another one? So the point is that he was reluctant. He couldn't understand what Prabhupada said. Prabhupada didn't get frustrated with him, even though Prabhupada repeated what he said about 5 times. You know? And the man just couldn't understand the depth of what Prabhupada's saying, which is also a lesson to devotees when they speak to people, when they try to help people. Just like a doctor. a doctor, has to try to cure someone, but generally speaking, they're sick because of their bad habits. That's why allopathic medicine is so popular nowadays, because people have so little sense restraint that they just try to provide something that will, take away the symptoms so they can continue to try to enjoy. But at the same time, they, it can be very frustrating for a doctor to try to help someone and they don't follow the recommendations. They don't stop eating this or they don't do this. But the doctor has that duty to try to help them in spite of their unwillingness. And so a devotee always has that duty to help someone in spite of their unwillingness.
Thank you, Maharaj. There's one other thing I would like to ask.
Yes.
Now, it seems that, of the 9 processes, Shravanam is the first one that's mentioned, and then Kirtanam. So it seems to me from the interaction between Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Rai that hearing is very important. So what I'm asking is, if hearing is so important, is it by hearing that gives us the desire to chant?
At least in the beginning. At least, unless you happen to meet Chaitanya Mahaprabhu on the street and he chants and you just, but still there's hearing. Even people who heard directly from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and became ecstatic. Only in the cases of those where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu just embraced them. But generally they would hear the holy name. So hearing is conducive to chanting, and it is the seed of chanting. Although once we begin chanting, then, and even when we're chanting, we're hearing. So hearing is a very, that's why it's first. Because when you hear, you can remember. When you hear, you can chant. When you hear, you can serve. And without hearing, none of these things can happen. So hearing is such an essential. Therefore, Krishna says, Yad Gyatva Yatmach Trinu. You must now hear from me, Arjuna. Now hear from me. So that we see that again and again. Hear. We hear and we hear until the hearing becomes like nectar. So hearing is definitely, we can't say that one thing is more important because, Rupa Goswami gives us the example of, that Parikshit Maharaj achieved perfection through hearing, Shukadev through chanting, and each different devotee, Prahlad Maharaj by remembering, Akrura by offering prayers. So every different devotee, they achieve perfection just by one of these processes. Many devotees, but generally for a general conditioned soul, all of the 9 processes are progressive. First you hear, then you chant, then you can remember Krishna, and when you remember Krishna, you want to serve his lotus feet, you want to worship him, you want to offer prayers, you want to become his servant, you want to become his friend, and finally, after you do all that, you want to offer everything to him.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you again for the answers.
Hare Krishna. So here's another couple questions. How important is it to follow Srila Prabhupada's program rather than to concoct our own? Well, that's the actual why we're speaking today. That the pure path of bhakti means that don't concoct your own. Follow Srila Prabhupada's program. And that is the biggest problem I see nowadays. People, because they're so addicted to social media or, some activity or something illicit or whatever, they can't follow Srila Prabhupada's program. So, wait a second, something happened here. Oh, wait a second, where the question just disappeared. I don't know how that happened, but anyway. Okay, I'm sorry, it was, some devotees even doubt what Srila Prabhupada says in his books. What can we do about this? We can faithfully follow, and by faithfully following and becoming happy in Krishna consciousness and showing how that Krishna consciousness, that is bringing us to higher levels of devotion, that we become an example, we become acharya. That's what acharya means, that we give achar, we show what is proper behavior. That's what we can do. In Kali Yuga, people want to see. They don't just want to hear it. They have to see. So we have to show them through our own personal example. Now there's another question. Giving up fruitive activity, giving up fruitive results means nirbandha, Krishna sambandhe. I never realized how tied in these two verses are. Brahma Samhita, where Krishna, nirbandha Krishna sambandhe, or we become detached by becoming attached to Krishna, and 247 to 50. Please speak a little more about how these verses are tied into the sense of bhakti's ability to cause relief from material desires due to karma bandhana itself. Okay, to speak a little more about that. Because, as Srila Prabhupada says in the purport that we read, that when you identify with the activity of itself as coming from me, or the results coming from me, or the cause coming from me, then it's not hetuki, it's not without motivation. There is motivation. I want to be the cause, otherwise pride comes. I want to enjoy the fruits, otherwise the desire for enjoyment. Or I want to do this because I like it. No, because it should be because it's my duty. And the best duty is the duty that's given to us by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, Bhakti's ability to cause relief, actually, it's the same thing. Bhakti causes relief. It causes relief immediately on the intellectual platform. And when we read something, that makes a lot of sense. Something that Prabhupada says, something in the Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, something that the Acharya says. It satisfies the intellect. Therefore, Krishna Chakravarti Thakur, when it says, Ayatma Suprasidati, he says, satisfying the intellect. Because the first thing you have to satisfy is the intellect. The intellect is analyzing. It's always analyzing everything. Is this, before the mind can accept or reject, the intellect has to analyze it, break it down. Just like before you digest something, the enzymes and acids in the stomach have to break it down. So we break it down intellectually, and that's where the challenge comes, putting it into practice. Now, it's easy to understand something theoretically. Sometimes it's not even so easy, but once you understand it theoretically, then you have to understand how to put it into practice. And that that putting it into practice is a result of devotional service itself. Of course, hearing something or intellectually perceiving something about bhakti is bhakti. But that bhakti is not complete until it engages ourself. That's why they call it Sankirtan, that the whole self, the body, the mind, the senses are all engaged in the kirtan or in the activity or in the devotion. It's not that only my intellect is engaged in some philosophical understanding and my senses are engaged in something else. This is called duplicity. So we have to avoid the duplicity. Bhakti's ability to cause relief. It causes relief when it becomes manifest in the mind of the devotee. Not just in the intellect, but in the mind, because the mind governs the senses. So when the mind is engaged in those activities, the senses will follow. I hope that's sufficient. So are there any other questions?
Hare Krishna. Can you just say something about the dangers of following or associating with our sampradayas? You know, sometimes on the internet, on YouTube, you get so many different kinds of kirtan. It's really strange sometimes what you get and what you see these people doing. You know, it's not not even just ISKCON, but even Gaudiya Vaishnava. It doesn't even seem anything close to like that. So can you speak about the dangers of, listening and following Upper Sampradaya?
Yes, it's not always Upper Sampradaya. I mean, sometimes I've seen things in ISKCON done by ISKCON devotees who are sincere. You know, they're sincere. They're just trying to do something. But when that type of kirtan becomes tainted by pride, I want everybody to hear my voice. I want them to see how I play mridanga. I want them to see how I play the harmonium, how I'm so adept at playing the kartals, and I can do all kinds of fancy little and all kinds of, and when we become absorbed in that, that is not something that comes from our chanting, but comes from the mode of passion, then that is all apasampradaya. Otherwise, we're getting it from apasampradaya. If we're not, the best way to chant, as far as I'm concerned, is do it like Prabhupada did. And then, and follow those people whose kirtan is enlivening, not because of the tunes, not because of the melodies, not because of the expertise on the mridanga or kartal or the voice, but because of the sincerity of purpose of trying to please Krishna. So, yes, I see devotees, just like I see devotees reading all kinds of esoteric books, and they really don't even understand the Bhagavad Gita yet fully. And then I see people doing kirtan very nicely. We look at Srila Prabhupada's kirtans, especially chanting the Maha Mantra. It was always very simple because Prabhupada's mood was preaching, and then you see other devotees, Hare Krishna, they do something that nobody can follow. And then, so what did that mean? Just like one time I was with Badahari Prabhu, and someone asked him, Badahari Prabhu, will you be performing today? And he said, I hope not. He said, I'm trying to serve. I'm not performing. Performing means, theatrical. I just want to serve. So apasampradaya means when there's personal interest. Otherwise, we can be in the sampradaya, but we can act in apasampradaya way. Because just like the first time I went to India, just to give a perfect example. So we went to Radhakund, Prabhupada didn't accompany us in all the parikrams. So we went to Radhakund, and all the devotees were pretty new. And even most of the leaders were, 3 or 4 years in the movement. And so we went to this one Babaji, Krishnadas Babaji, and so he's taking us around, smiling, nice devotee. He's told us 3 stories. And so then I got back, and a few days later, I was reading Chaitanya Charitamrita. By Krishna's arrangement, I just opened Chaitanya Charitamrita. And Srila Prabhupada said in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that sometimes the sahajas say this, and there were the 3 stories. And Prabhupada gave the correct version. So I could see that, I was trying to be situated in our sampradaya, but this apa sampradaya influence just crept in. So we always have to be very careful. Sometimes we have a desire to do something that's different, but actually the difference should be in the increase of bhakti, not in the activity itself. The activity of itself is the same. Chanting Hare Krishna, serving the deities, serving the devotees, serving the humanity by giving the holy name. It's very, very simple. Prabhupada said 3 things: distribute prasadam, distribute books, distribute the holy name. That's basically our program. So,
If one does something concocted for themselves, it's one thing, but then other people follow them, and sometimes these people, devotees or maybe non-devotees also, sometimes they actually preach that. That's why I'm asking about that. It's a bit disturbing to see some of those things
that's
happen in our
been there.
society.
That's been there since time immemorial. It was there in Lord Chaitanya's time. The Apa Sampradayas were there. Lord Chaitanya would preach against it. That's the example he gave us. But he didn't get into it like, so much. He just preached against it and gave the example of what pure bhakti and real bhakti is. I see Bhagavan Narada has his hand up. Bhagavan Narada. Oh, you're muted. No, just one second. Let me find. Oh, you disappeared here. There you are. Now you can unmute. I think you should be able to unmute.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I have a question. I'm going to try and phrase it as best as I can, but basically, you talked about detachment, from sort of like our endeavors or the results and leaving it up to Krishna. Now, when we're trying to make an offering or do some outreach or some preaching engagement, my question is like, sometimes we can overplan things to a point to where the project or the endeavor or the outreach, it suffers, or sometimes we can underplan things because it becomes more of a whimsical activity. Someone had, we had mentioned that word whimsical. So how do we strike that balance between planning and then also leaving it up to Krishna? I just feel like you can't go one extreme or the other. So how do we know when we have a fair balance, or how do we gauge that balance, especially if there's not so many devotees that we can associate with and whatnot?
Well, in the age of electronics, you can associate with a lot more devotees than you could have previously. But it may not be the same as being there with them. But sometimes also when you're there with someone, you see things that might be difficult to digest. So sometimes it's better to have electronic associate. You just get the best. You get the icing on cake without the having to wash the plate. But the best thing that we just, as Chanakya Pandit said, even if somebody has some undesirable qualities, we try to remember that, what am I doing? We were trying to take something nectarian or something very wonderful, even if it's coming from a dirty place. So we shouldn't let people's personalities or difficult circumstances surrounding them or surrounding us disturb us. And therefore, Krishna begins Bhagavad Gita by speaking again and again about this. That, in second chapter, text number 38, that Sukha Dukkha Samakrite, Jaya Jayo, Labha Labho Jaya Jayo, that in happiness and distress, victory or defeat, and gain or loss, we should always be the same and simply do our duty. And then, that trying to remember the verse. Dukeshvanudvignamana sukeshu vikitas priyaha. No, pitaragabaya krodha. The 256, we should always, even in the midst of the greatest miseries or even in the midst of elation, we should always maintain steadiness. So the balance is that steadiness. We're not disturbed by distress. We're not disturbed by, on the contrary, distress, difficult circumstances, difficult people. Prabhupada was never disturbed by everybody. Everybody around him was difficult because he was so much more elevated than everybody around him, that everybody around him was a potential disturbance. What did Prabhupada do? He just served them. He just served them, trying to bring them to Krishna consciousness. Now, if somebody is subordinate to us, we can instruct them to the point where they will accept our instruction. Just like I have the experience that even in disciples, that I can only say as much as they can digest. I can't say more than that. Sometimes I try to, but if I'm giving a personal instruction or indication, but sometimes I just see that this person, this is as far as they can go. So you try to take them as far as they can go. You try to help them. You try to benefit from someone as far as you can benefit. So that's the real balance. The balance, Bhagavad Gita speaks about balance. Speaks about, all through the Bhagavad Gita, speaking about balancing, because we're in the world of duality. And therefore, Krishna in the 6th chapter, he says, don't eat too much, don't eat too little, don't sleep too much, don't sleep too little. Otherwise, find the middle ground, because that middle ground means that I'm not attached to the different things that are, different things that, the details of a circumstance, but really understanding the essence. The essence is, if it's difficult for me, I should learn from it. If it's beneficial for me, I should learn from it. I should progress. I should make everything that Krishna sends me a part of my process of advancing in Krishna consciousness. That's not easy. And that's why most people go away, meaning they don't necessarily give up devotional service, but they go away from what we're talking about today, the true path of bhakti. And they add something, because they think that bhakti is boring, because they can't get onto the internal platform. So if you can't get onto the internal platform through the chanting of the holy name, as we just spoke about, tan nama grahanadibi, if you can't enter into that platform, then it will be very difficult to progress spiritually, because there's so many challenges. We have to see those challenges as Krishna's mercy. If it were easy to do that, then bhakti wouldn't be very, it wouldn't be very elevated. The fact that these so many difficulties are there in trying to behave properly, trying to act properly, trying to deal properly, trying to, the fact that all these is strenuous indicates that we're on the right path. This is something that is very pure, and therefore it becomes challenging. Is that okay? Hare Krishna. So it's been a while since we started. I may have to stop here. I have some things I have to do this evening. So I think we will stop here. I want to thank you all very much for your kind attention, and I hope that I've been able to give some service. And everyone, please take up this true path of bhakti by taking what Srila Prabhupada says very, very seriously.
Thank you all.
very much.
Thank you very
Wait.
much, Gurudev. Also, I know you have a very busy schedule. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanandi. There you go.
His Holiness Guru Prasad Swami ki jai.
Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai.
Haribo.
Haribo.
Hare Krishna, Guru.
Jai Gauranga Hare.
Hare Krishna.
Haribo.
Hare Krishna, Guruji. Thanks.
Jai Hare Krishna Siddha Guru.
Hare Krishna, Guru.
Jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, everyone.